Welcome to this panel on art.
By the way, this is going to be in Spanish, so if you need translation, just plug the earphones in your armrest. Esta charla va a hablar, es un panel sobre cómo hacer cultura.
It's a panel on art, of the new way of doing art and culture in the internet. We're going to see how the new models of distribution have evolved. Hello, can you hear me? As well as the new ways of funding for collaborative creation. Miguel Ríos, Francis Montero, the delegate of ONCE, Patricio Campos.
Bueno, pues buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure for us to meet you in this second day of Spark. In this panel, because the simple fact of having them today here is an extraordinary experience, and we're going to dedicate all our time to them, to what they are going to tell us. We're going to work in the following way. Each of the panelists will take a few minutes to do a presentation, and then we will start with a debate and with questions on my part and also your questions from the floor. Our three guests today have a common denominator, and that is that they have talent and commitment. They've got a professional and personal talent, and also a public and social commitment in absolutely everything they do, since they wake up in the morning until they go to bed. He was the delegate in Granada in the past, and he's an Andalusian, and as he says, he's totally convinced of being Andalusian. He's received tell you that those who are born in Andalusia have no merit of that. But I was not born in Andalusia, but I decided to become Andalusian, and that's a real merit. The microphone, please. Hello? Hello, you can buy your bag in Lirola. I did not understand what you say. Here, we should have a monitor for everyone to hear, so that we can hear each other. So we need to pronounce very well. What did you say, Patricio? Perfect. I was saying that I am an Andalusian because I'm convinced of being an Andalusian. And here there are two 3 Andalusians. And I was saying that the fact of being Andalusian, just because you're born in Andalusia, well, it's okay, but the real merit is for those who were born somewhere else but decided to become Andalusian, because Andalusia has convinced us of so. And what is ONCE, and what does ONCE does for culture for all, for an inclusive culture? I'd like to start with a quotation by Ortega Gasset, who said, life takes becomes or accepts takes sense when you decide not to renounce to anything. And when the ONCE Foundation was created, it's because we decided we didn't want to renounce. It was then when when a group of women and men decided that they wanted to be citizens just like the rest of the citizens, and they wanted to live in a world that would be equal for all. They wanted to be people just like the other people, not more important but not less important than anyone else. And that was in 1975. In these years, we've achieved an intangible model, a unique and single model throughout the world, but they have produced a philosophical change in this country. People with disability, people that are more vulnerable now have dignity. We do not want to renounce to things, and we do not want to renounce to culture either. Culture is one of the best ways to do social integration, social inclusion, social normalization, but not only from the fact of enjoying culture. It is important for a blind person or a person with disability to be able to enjoy culture, but also we consider that one of the best ways of normalization would be being an actor, an agent in culture, and not only a passive element in culture. We've done this with music, theater, with all sorts of cultural exhibitions, and very extraordinary artists have participated in and have done great contributions to the world of culture. Many of them were blind, and I won't mention them. I'm sure you can think of many of them. But how can we do a culture that would be adequately inclusive? Well, not giving up, not renouncing to it. First, we wanted to be equal, and now 75 years after, we, yes, are equal, but we still have to defend the welfare state, because it's something we've been building all together during the last years. And the people at risk of social exclusions were the last people to be incorporated in this welfare state. To start with, we wanted to be equal, and now we want to be different. That means that we want to be respected as people who are different, like everyone else. Perhaps everyone needs a certain adaptation to have a normal everyday life, a mobile or a simple device. We believe in a world that will offer equal opportunities, and disability is just a complement of life. And with an adequate visibility, education and training, it's just another thing in life. I usually say that it is Congress halls and cities and museums that have a disability, not people. The people who look at us are the ones that are disabled, or a theater that doesn't have a ramp, or a university that does not have the adequate access ramps. If we use a ramp, we have a book translated into Braille, or we allow access to a concert live by Miguel Rio. All this is accessible culture. So we do not want the environment to be disabled, because people are not disabled. And the worst disability is not to be able to feel. And culture is something that is felt. And feelings must have no barriers. So the capacity to feel is something we all should be able to have access to. It's fair to have a book signed by Luis, but we should all be able to read it. So the other people must make sure the book will be the other people must make sure that the book is accessible to those who cannot see. And the concert by Miguel Ríos should be accessible if a person with a hearing disability goes to it and live, because that way he can really hear it. The capacity of development of a people, of the society, this is not related to the level of income. The level of development of a society is measured by the way we approach and take care of people with disability. If we will never have a truly democratic society if we exclude one of its members. For us, the new technologies is a window to the world, for normalization and integration. And we are fighting against digital divide. The access to information through the networks makes us all equal, only if the software and IT platforms are accessible. I have a mobile that is totally accepted, and I've given it to Maria Angeles because I don't want it to start ringing here. But if I enter the website of a public administration, and it should be accessible according to the law, but they're not accessible in reality, or if I try to buy a ticket to a concert or a museum, and those websites are not accessible, then I have no autonomy. Just imagine if you needed someone or something to go to a bar after the day today for a beer or to go to a concert. We are fighting for total citizenship, full citizenship. This is why new technologies open a window to us, to the world, and to culture, of course, too. So disability should be considered as a disability of the environment and not in terms of people, because we all have some kind of, we all need a certain degree of adaptation. So I want to ask for all platforms and websites to be accessible, because that really offers us equal access to all. I really wish we will have an information society and new technologies for all. And that would be the second part of what I want to say. And I would remind you that making accessible a website, web page, or any IT environment is just an issue of design. It's like when you want to build a building. If you use a ramp, you're not excluding anyone. It benefits everybody. And when we design an IT environment, it's also an issue of internal architecture. It will give us access to the same information as anyone else. Thank you. Well, precisely yesterday, Patricio, just mentioned several issues related to accessibility, and yesterday in the same forum there were several projects that were presented, and they were very innovative, because the reflection is that the digital divide, instead of being reduced, it's increased, and not only due to economic or in economic terms, but also in fields related to disability. Luis García Montero is is a professor of the University of Granada and has published several books in poetry and novels. And to present Luis García here in this room called García Lorca is something that is really serious, and I am not going to dedicate any more time to present him, to introduce him to you, because, well, the important thing will be to listen to his words. Thank you, Agustin, and I would also like to thank the organizers of this forum for having invited me and for giving me the opportunity to talk to you here around this table with these dear colleagues. The technological evolution has produced an enormous change in our work from the point of view of possibilities and efficiency. I'm sorry. Well, sorry, I feel it in my work as a writer and also in my work as a professor. And also when I work as a collaborator in the radio and also with written press. Technology has led to an enormous radical change, very drastic change, and this has opened the space of globalization to everyday life. Today, to talk about new technologies is just like talking about our everyday life and about our possibilities of communicating with any other human being all around the world. And this has an immediate efficiency in terms of searching for information, looking for references, when you want to communicate and spread ideas, also in terms of having access to as many points as possible, and both when you're producing information and when you're reading or receiving information. This is why networks have a specific value in our society. It's the new metaphor of public space. Currently, the public space is not represented by the square of a city. It's not represented in that square. It's represented in the networks, in the places, national and international spaces of where people meet in the networks. So when we have to make our conscious work, because throughout the history of human beings, of mankind, we've been used to seeing our best virtues become defects and our best advances become dangers. In the 40s, a poet such as Pedro Salina, who had defended technology, who had written love poem to a car, to a writing machine, to any device. Then later on he had to write a poem to the nuclear bomb, and he had to become desperate and say that technology, which was the most optimistic thing of mankind for him, something like that, how could that become a weapon for mass destruction? And this is the way I think about networks, taking into account also their enormous value and all the possibilities they offer. From the point of view of press, the networks have opened extraordinary opportunities for a democratic exercise of press today. But when you have politicians who are controlling the media, or financial control of the media, who want to make the media who want the media to serve them, the fact of defending free and independent information services is a radical value. And networks are supporting this. New supports are allowing for the launching of information projects for true and independent information. And these kind of projects were not available in the past because of the previous supports. This kind of platforms couldn't be created in the past. But what is the danger, potential danger of this? That the new possibilities of the networks may hide the very needed and serious debate required by the press, because often when we talk about modernity and the press of the future, there's a debate between paper press and digital press, but in my opinion that's a wrong idea. We are in fact opposing two different concepts: a serious and free media or a controlled and biased media. We can do a very bad kind of press on paper. So if we want to reduce the importance of journalists, we may run a very serious risk. If we're working on digital newspapers with very few journalists and with people who do not have the capacity of organizing the information and categorizing the information, we will be producing newspapers that will be of a very bad quality, even if we do them on paper. If we only use the news that come through news agencies that are under the control of 4 or 5 big companies, then we will be doing a bad exercise of press in terms of not being democratic enough. The new supports are of a great help for the development of a democratic media and democratic press, but we would be misunderstanding things if we do not really reflect about the kind of newspapers, the kind of press we want to have. Another danger that I have identified is that we need a place to meet, but also different conscience and different minds that wish to debate. That implies that those minds need to be able to give an opinion and to listen somebody else's opinion. For an adequate dialogue, both elements are necessary. With the new opportunities offered by the net, I think that in many occasions the public wishes to give their opinion, but they are not willing to listen to the opinion of other people. I also consider that people read with a lot more attention when they're reading on a paper instead that when they are reading on a screen. People enjoy the possibility of giving their opinion about what they're reading, but at the same time we should remember that we should listen to other people's opinions too. You may write a newspaper on football, for example, with a nuance of a thinking that may not be limited to the highlights, saying that I'm a Barcelona's fan. And then in the comments you find in the digital newspapers there are comments that are very despective comments. You've been accused of being a fan of a certain club or a different club, and another one will accuse you of not liking football at all. So we should take profit of the possibility of talking and discussing thanks to the new technologies, but at the same time we should not forget that we should read very carefully and respect other people's opinions. With regards to my work as a writer, the new networks have also brought up some issues very similar to what I've mentioned about newspapers. First of all, I'd like to say that I like to buy e-books and read e-books. I think new supports, although I also love the traditional book, I think these new e-books are not incompatible. When in the 80s I prepared my PhD thesis, I had a suitcase with 80 or 100 books, and also I used writing machine, and whenever I wanted to introduce a change, I had to rewrite the whole page. So when I think about all that, I really understand very deeply what a wonderful thing new technologies are. But at the same time, we should remember that these new supports, these new media should lead to the democratization of culture. If I buy a book, an e-book, I shouldn't pay nearly the same price as I'd be paying for that same book on paper. Costs are reduced when we are producing e-books. If you don't need to pay for paper, the distribution channels, you don't have to pay the bookshop and so on. Why should you pay such a high price for a book that has so limited costs in comparison? Now, as an author, I'd say, as a writer, I'd say that you also need to pay for culture. Writers, also singers, musicians, we live thanks to our work, and some pieces of art are not only related to creation but also to the industry. To generate a digital revolution without paying any copyrights and promoting piracy would mean that authors will need to be linked to sponsors, and now in the current time sponsors are not the church nor the king but the banks and the new financial powers. And if the artists may not live thanks to the money they earn by selling their pieces of art, then they will need to find an alternative way to pay for their living. It is a good thing that new technologies and networks will reduce the cost of culture, but at the same time it is totally unfair to believe piracy is the right way to approach art. And I would now like to finish with a comment related to literature. We may not allow the networks to make us forget about a reflection on quality. A public space should not be a dump. And the same comment I said about books, saying that traditional in the traditional newspapers there were professionals who could identify quality, and in that case there's the possibility of censoring elements that are not of sufficient quality, and this implies the creation of a hierarchy, and this allows us to distinguish the pieces that have a value and those that are just rubbish. Also, other kinds of censorship could be included, like from the ideological point of view or the aesthetic point of view. And this is also taking place in the net. Creation requires artists to be humble and to have a critical conscience. And some people write a poem and publish it on the net, and they think that they are, for example, Cervantes or Garcia Lorca. But you may not believe such a thing. I am very different from Garcia Lorca, and even if many people read me, I am not as important as Garcia Lorca. I'm misunderstanding things. And in this sense, people who have access to networks should also have this same critical conscious, critical awareness, and we must not forget the talent each person has, and the importance and relevance each person has, and because otherwise we will turn those public spaces into a dump. These are the issues I wanted to mention today. We're not talking about a positive or negative state, because new technologies have enriched society to enormous levels, in terms of very deep intellectual thinking, but also in terms of improving our everyday life. But we must not forget that this tool will depend on the way we use it. And technology is opening many possibilities, but it will not replace the very profound and deep values that have been produced by this democratic society. If we forget those values, technology will go against us. Thank you very much.
Bueno. Huelga decir que, claro, que me encantaría ahora.
Needless to say, I would like to have a newspaper now to have the chronicle of what we are hearing here. We have several headlines. Miguel Ríos, and I'm back to the beginning of the panel, is a person, a character that is very well known in any of your levels. The personal level, the citizen level, the family level, etc., etc. Because we is somebody that we have all made interiorized. It is difficult to achieve in a public character. Miguel said, I have worked all my life. And one may think to be free, to have money, etc. No, he said, to be loved, he said. This is very hard because now he could ruin something if he says something that you don't like. So we believe in Miguel. Thank you. Very good afternoon. Amen, Luis. The bad thing is speaking after somebody who's an intellectual. He steals everything you were going to say. The good thing about being somebody who belongs to the show business is that if I come up and dance, he will be ashamed. I will try to connect with Luis according to what he was saying. Goodness, kindness of this event here. There's an event here of telecenters. I learned quite recently that Guadalinfo was a network that had kind of 800 villages in Andalusia. Some of them were smaller than 5,000 inhabitants. I think this is a wonderful extension of what's social. This is something necessary to deal with something that has to do with globalization, with internationalization, with the exchange of ideas, etc. And also democratization of thinking, of participation. I believe that being backwards with regard to societies that are very much advanced in as much as new technologies, it is a form of illiteracy, so to say. You will be missing the ability to enjoy tools such as the internet, which is absolutely essential to develop human beings. I believe that internet has represented for my sector, musicians, and I'm retired. You know I'm retired. I'm too old to do anything in the show business, but I can think about the past, what internet has been for music. Later on we will speak about sustainability of culture and music in this new medium, but we cannot speak about the future if we don't speak about the past. Music has been the test bank the lab where we have developed a cruel battle against something that Luis mentioned earlier, which is the right to intellectual property, the right to own your work. I remember very clearly when we started seeing people that had that were selling records and CDs on the street. That immigrants in very bad situation, facing very bad conditions, showed the CD covers on the floor. So the metaphor of seeing the music on the floor was very clear. It was a picture, an image of the effect of this buying culture that is very cheap. So I remember at that time when the problem was having a common enemy, and that was the industry of the record companies. That has been really miserable. In the good moments, they absolutely ignored the first obligation of a businessman, which is having your customers happy, providing products that were not deceiving the customers. When we moved from vinyl records to CDs, when the industry gives the tool that can be pirated by themselves, there's kind of a pink spring of recovering music in a different support, and we all ran to buy the collection of the Beatles, the Allman Brothers, etc. Everybody would buy whatever they wanted, and the industry, instead of taking a further move, because it is a step beyond, and technically it's much cheaper, because what was very expensive then was the vinyl manipulation, and the vinyl was more expensive, but CDs were cheaper, and they were too greedy, and they didn't want to make it cheaper, and the new supports were, or could have been, much more attractive by giving you all the information, providing some extra element, because technology enables it. They became absolutely greedy human beings, those in the record industry, and they erased any trace of musicians in the record. So it was just a tiny leaflet with a cover, and the other side, and on the other side they had to write down the songs, but the drummer was not shown. The producer didn't say what was the record studio that was used for the recording. They got rid of information when people actually wanted more information because they deserved it. In fact, I always had a quarrel with all companies I had. I actually had a terrible time with them. At the beginning, there's always a honeymoon. You get the record, everything goes okay, and when something goes wrong, when somebody sells more records than you do, when somebody is more manipulative, more easily manipulated, then when you face conflicts. And I have always quarreled with them. Because the ability to create the independence deserved fighting. But having said that, the industry is not the one to blame, the only one to blame. They, of course, made mistakes, But this does not mean that the mistake has to be attributed to the guys that actually played in the record. You cannot just destroy the weakest part of the chain. So if records were 20 euros, the musician got maybe 80 cents from those 20 euros, and some of them did it for free. But within this principle that we're mentioning, when these young lads that were selling records on top of the blanket on the floor, exploited by mafias that were getting the benefits of this business of selling records at a very low price, when nobody in the chain was getting any money, in the production chain, that was then the beginning of the end of the record industry in Spain, which is the beginning of the end of creation as such. Because I can't ignore that to be able to create a song, we need an atmosphere, we need an environment that makes it possible for this song to reach the final user, the end user. The end user is the one that has to be the recipient of the music. The industry, what gave us at the moment, what they could do as an industry, and I'm speaking both the record industry, the majors, the major companies, or the independent companies, the indies as well, or even those of us that self-published the records. We achieved vehicles for people to be able to listen to the music. Even if you download your songs in the internet, cases such as Annie B. Sweet, for instance, a girl who's there in MySpace. Pablo. She's a fan, yes. No. This guy is also in MySpace or YouTube. This ability that the internet provides us is that the difficulty of reaching the product without prescriptions is enormous. The musicians and I recommend a book for those of you that are skeptical. Robert Levine is called this book here. This explains exactly the downfall of creation in general in the internet. But also, it explains that it has not been a downfall without winners or losers. There are big corporations that have earned a lot of money with the ruin of many musicians. This is clear, and if you want, we can speak about this later. So what I would like to mention, delving into what Luis has said, of course, I want to welcome everybody who wants to download their stuff in the internet. There are tremendous vehicles to do it, and we have to make use of them. But please do respect those that would think or would say that their own work is valued with the money that anybody would receive as a worker. So I hope this is useful. As some food for thought, these dire straits that we're going through as musicians, some of the musicians are going through. We could have mentioned the things that we had around music. If we could tell the number of jobs that have been lost, any kind of industry, the coal industry, the mining industry, etc., none of them may have lost as many people as we have lost in the world of music. So we'll speak about this, and we'll speak about hope, of course. We will speak about hope, because there are plenty of people that still think that they want to pay for a song of the favorite singer, or for a piece of information from the journalist, or from a film of the director that he or she likes, etc. And that's the chain of creation available to people, and this enables the rest of the artists to do that. Thank you.
Bueno, pues yo desde aquí.
Well, from here, I must say I do not see people very well. Okay, with a little bit more light to see if someone wants to ask a question. But I've just received a question to the hashtag Spark13, and it's a question related to what Miguel just said. And I would like the three of our panelists to answer that question. Rodriguez Ibarra, I didn't attend that panel, but in Spark 13 I've been told that he was talking about a model of culture nearly free of charge, as an alternative to piracy. Miguel, could you start? I didn't really hear you very well. I'm suffering from Beethoven's disability. I don't see, he doesn't hear. What's your problem? Rodriguez Ibarra yesterday on this same stage, he was talking about a nearly free model as an alternative to piracy. This is called Spotify and iTunes. If you know the amount of money Google has earned with culture, trying even to make anti-piracy laws that are not very strict and very fragile throughout the world. Google has tried to make those laws disappear, to make them totally disappear with zero control of copyright. You would understand that the enemy in this sense, and the people who really earn money with this, are the people who are transporting the signal. We were insulted because we asked for money in exchange of our music, but no one really insulted Telefonica for the very bad broadband it offered. And in Sky, if you write the word robbers in the internet, you find Sky next to it, and Sky is the Society for the Protection of Copyright. Yes, the Sky didn't work very well, but you know, Telefonica has done things that are a lot worse than that. I think that we've been accused, and we've been demonized by propaganda agents, as they are mentioned here in this book. Propaganda agents in social media. Here is Lauren Lessing, who's a very important professor in Harvard, who's been in Silicon Valley and so on, a very interesting person. And he's paid by several companies. And his job is to lobby against copyrights. The thing is that they don't want to be obliged to ask for permission in order to upload something. It's a lot more difficult to create a song, a poem, or a book than to upload those pieces of art to the internet and transport them. So I think the future is related to this. A book with, as it was mentioned before, in order to print this book, ink has been used, trees have been cut down, it has been transported, and you shouldn't pay the same amount for the book here than if you read it, you get the e-book. And the same goes for music. You shouldn't pay the same for music on a CD than for music on Spotify. But it is very clear that all these pieces of art should have a price, and we can discuss that with users. But why should we have access to all the songs, to all musics? Why should thousands of songs be stored, and that have led to people that have produced a lack of interest in people? Because people who have thousands and thousands of songs in iPods, they just do not enjoy them. They are not listening to them. Why should only culture be accessible? Other things should be accessible too, perhaps. I think I'd like all the other companies that are not well run to be judged in the same way. I don't know how Google or Apple are run, but in any case, I'm not. If you read about Steve Jobs' life, apparently, yes, he was a great trade person, a salesperson, a great inventor, but at the same time, he was very heartless. I don't understand why people accuse or insult some people or some organizations like the Society for the Protection of Copyright in Spain. Why do they choose those people or organizations to accuse them and insult them? Poetry has never been an industry. I need to have another job to live, to be able to pay my bills. So I think about all this in terms of the rights of the user. Let's imagine that politics should be free and that Mr. Ibarra shouldn't have a salary for being the president of Extremadura, of the Extremadura region, or for having a politician responsibility. What would I be saying? I would be saying that he's a citizen, or as a citizen I would be losing the right to be represented by citizens, because only people who are rich people or people with that are financed by banks could be in the government. So a very progressive thing, or a very interesting thing, of having a politician who's not being paid for that. This may sound like a very interesting thing, but then it would take us back a couple of centuries in history. What about press? If I said that the press should be totally free, I want to go into the internet and I don't want to pay a single penny to get information, to be informed. So what am I saying? That means that journalists will not be able to be independent because they cannot make a living from what they do, and that means that they would need to be financed by the government or by the banks or some big powers. So if I want to consume a product of quality, independent, and produced by people with dignity, I need to pay professionals to do so. And not only two people who will organize a couple of blogs or reorganize the news they receive from news agencies. And therefore, I think about all this from the standpoint of the user. So, well, what do I want to? Where do I want to invest my money? Is it worth investing my money in free politics, in free culture, in free journalism? I think it is worth it. We are a lot more than animals, condemned to trade. I think that it is worth investing money in free culture, and also the dignity of the time dedicated to work and the time dedicated to leisure. And this is why I want to invest my money in dignified leisure. And I do not want to dedicate my leisure time to junk TV programs. And this is why Mr. Ibarra participates in this very cheap popularism that is having an impact on the crisis of our society. If you allow me, in relation to what Agustin said and what you're saying, yes, accessibility, yes, of course, we're talking about accessibility, but also from the economic point of view. It's got to be affordable. You need to be able to pay for book. That's accessibility. Miguel Rios was telling me about an anecdote from Carlos Canos, and he was saying, we write songs or books for people to feel, to communicate what we think, and try to communicate a different message. I don't know whether culture should be free or not, but it should be sustainable for sure. And for it to be sustainable, it's got to be productive. And for it to be productive, it's got to be away from speculation. And in this country, during the last years, we've been talking a lot about public investment in health, in education, as elements that should guarantee the welfare state of this country, but also culture. Culture identifies us as a people. Now we talk a lot about the Spanish brand, but for example, Andalusian culture is one element that really represents the Spanish brand abroad. So we should promote sustainable culture, productive culture. Where is the limit? I'm not sure. But we must not forget that culture is an element for democratization, for citizens to be free, and that it must be affordable and accessible. I think that all of us agree on something. Of course, taxes, in our opinion, should be related to the amount of income. And the second thing is that culture should be accessible in all senses, sustainable and productive too. The debate, of course, is on an issue that is very controversial. The issue of whether culture should be free or not. Last week we were discussing whether journalism should be free or not, and everybody agreed on something. That could be one of the greatest dangers for free journalism and independent journalism. If we need to pay for things, if we want them to have a minimum level of quality, and if we want to have an independent culture, we'll need to pay for that. I would like to say, dear Agustin, I would like to defend here and claim that we've been the guinea pigs while the music was suffering so much. Such an erosion. Well, in fact, journalists didn't talk about that because journalists didn't felt threatened. But now there is an attack against everything that is related to creation: cinema, literature, music, journalism, televisions too. Do you know the amount of money we're talking about? A lot of jobs are lost. Because of the people who are downloading TV programs totally free. It's quite clear that it was not well seen to talk about these things. Well, conversations are not chosen, they are promoted, publicly promoted or not. When we talk about the cultural industry, it's very easy to talk about how much the famous singer or the famous musician charges for a concert. But we forget that when we are downloading a song or a film, we're not taking money from that famous actress. We're taking money away from all the team who works for the film, like the hairdresser and so on. All the people who work in the film industry and also in the theater industry. It's a terrible thing that the taxes you have to pay for a ticket to see a piece of when you want to go to the theater, you have to pay 21% of taxes in the ticket, and that's a terrible disaster. A Dutch person will pay 4%. In Germany, they pay 7%, and here we pay 21%. And that's an aggression against culture, an attack. I think that putting the VAT down, the VAT down, is very important with regards to cultural assets. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pay anything to go to the theater. No, you should pay a certain amount that will allow other people to make their living from that, the hairdresser, the tailor, and so on. But we shouldn't be paying such a high tax to go to the theater, because otherwise we will again be in the hands of those people who do not need to work to live. Today again, Spark 13 is a trending topic, this hashtag. So congratulations to all of you, and this is the second day in a row, because yesterday it was the same thing at this same time. So now I would like you to reflect a little bit about the very positive things of these ICTs. Not long ago I heard someone compare the possibility of your reflections reaching millions of people throughout the world, and this was compared to, and of course of what may come in the future from these technologies, and this was compared to the invention of the print. So the impact and consequences of the invention of the print and the impact and consequences of these new technologies. Well, I think it's totally clear. There's no doubt about that. I said before that this brings the globalization to our everyday life, and this is what the new technologies are allowing. It allows participation, communication. They allow for human dialogue. And as I said before, this could be limited to an abstract idea of speculative movements, and therefore I think new technologies do have an enormous significance and a very positive importance. I always insist that throughout our lives, our worst defects evolve from our best virtues, and this is why I'm not thinking about the new technologies in terms of saying whether they are positive or negative, but I am thinking about conscious, about awareness and the duty. When we inform about something, it's a very positive thing to have the direct participation of the public, of someone who can send a piece of news immediately. That's a very positive thing, but this should not lead to ignoring or not counting on trained professional journalists, for them who should still be organizing and presenting the information. We should not only limit the information to the reaction anyone can bring in 30 seconds, but of professional journalists who have been informed of that. Well, now we're talking, about the development of the internet. It's something that has been developed in the last 10, 12 years. So really just in really a second in terms of if we consider the whole history of mankind. This is a real change that will bring enormous hopes and also some, unfair elements. We need to talk about the negative aspects of this, and many colleagues prefer to avoid this because it's not cool to talk about this. But nevertheless, once this is overcome, this reality is going to be incredible. Here we have people, representative villages that only have like 300 or 500 inhabitants, really remote villages. That's incredible. I know that the people who are here are aware of all this. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. So they are all aware of the fact that we are being witnesses of something that is incredible. It's like giving birth. And only after birth, and once these pains of giving birth will be over and forgotten, we will see the evolution. It's like a baby born and then demanding its own dignity. This is all. Here there are many traders, and here there are many people saying that it's other people taking the money, but it's not true. There's a lot of money there. Those merchants are taking profit of all this. They're making profit, and what people want is a distribution of the profits. And I am sure that this new creature, this new ICTs will have a future. And if mankind fails, it's because these kind of movements of the civil society fail. You were asking about. You were asking us whether we could compare the invention of print, and the ICTs. Well, the print allowed us to spread information and culture. And this is what we're doing now, what Dalinfo is doing now. You're taking a window to the world that is now open in every village in Andalusia. I agree on what It was said about journalists and professional journalists, but networks are there for that. Social media, you know, citizens is something that is not, their opinions are not censored, and there we can give our opinion in a free way and independently. And therefore, the social media, the internet are the open window to freedom and independence. Are you sure that the US does not control social media? I am sure and convinced that I can write whatever I want in social media and no one will determine what I say. You know, the poet's experience is very, a minority experience. And we do not mind being alone. And we do not mind having a different opinion. And we do not mind being criticized by people, because we're used to that.
Those of us that have gone through a historical experience in a country that was right-wing in many occasions, we realize now that there are populist movements that are controlled by money, and I don't think that the financial power of the US have nothing to do with the current trends of opinion in the social networks. I'm being told that we don't have any more time. I am afraid somebody could come and say, stop it right now. So we won't finish like this. I would like each guest to carry out a short reflection in 1 minute to close this panel. That has plenty of headlines. The first reflection is that I'm very happy to be here. It's been a pleasure to be here. I think that we haven't been enough to match the audience. We would have had a more intimate hall. I thought we were going to speak for a while looking at them, because they have a lot to say, much more than we can. Probably they know a lot more about the internet than I do. I'm a user. And I would have liked to have something here to hear what you were saying. It is very important for conversation. If I had heard you, I would have said, yes, great, or whatever. We have to hurry up. 15 seconds to say that it is essential. Technology is essential, and just like any other important thing in life, we have to be aware of the repercussions, and we have to try and use it adequately and to make it part of our preoccupations. Number one preoccupation, actually. It is the social body, and we have to treat our body well. I'm going to dance. We have 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. Yes, 1 minute, okay. I will watch you. We were speaking about the defeat or the triumph or failure or whatever. I do invite you to the following. Life is a river. Life is a river. And it has two parts: success and failure or defeat. It depends on us to cross that river. And sometimes we don't do it because we're scared. We have to be scared of fear. Arthur Clarke said, the only way to know the limits of what's possible is to cross what's possible and look for the impossible. Cross the river when you have the opportunity. Failure does not exist. Either we win or lose, or learn, but we never lose. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, de verdad, por vuestra...
Thank you very much for your reflections. One more picture for remembrance. And briefly afterwards, we're going to